Good Friday, the day that Jesus faced injustice, suffering, and death on a cross. He didn't deserve it because Jesus was who he said he was. But still, this was a path that he chose. He saw it all coming, and when you see something coming, you can take steps to avoid it. And yet, when he was in the garden, he realized that although he wanted another way for himself, there was no other way to save us. So he decided to choose us instead of himself. He decided to choose his cross. Jesus bore the cross for us, and we understand that cross-bearing, by which we mean suffering for the sake of Jesus, suffering for the sake of the gospel, is an act of faithfulness. Earlier in his ministry, Jesus said that if anyone would come after him, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Like the teen who suffers alienation as he chooses to witness to the truth of Jesus, even though he knows it's going to put him on the outs with his friends. Or the one who at gunpoint refuses to deny Jesus. Or our healthcare and other essential workers who over this last year chose to risk their lives because they heard the call to serve. But what about those who didn't choose it? You know, there are many essential workers who might have felt like they didn't really have a choice. They needed the money, they needed the paycheck, and they had to report to work. What about them? Or those who may have been in worship one day and suddenly a gunman just shows up and opens fire? Or how about Simon of Cyrene? He's one of the characters in the Good Friday story. Let's listen to this verse about him. It comes to us from Mark chapter 15 and verse 21. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. Do you hear that? They forced him to carry the cross. It wasn't something that he chose. It was something that he was compelled to do. Mark just has this one little verse about this, about Simon. But I wonder how Simon felt there in that moment. He was coming into the city. He's probably coming for Passover. Being that he was African, it's very likely he may never have even heard about Jesus. He meets him for the first time when Jesus is a convicted criminal. He's fallen down. He's got a broken and bruised and badly beaten body. And the Roman soldiers whose job it was to execute Jesus, they couldn't get Jesus to move anymore with that cross, so they conscripted Simon, this man who under Roman law has no other choice but to obey the order to pick up Jesus' cross. His plans changed that day when he was forced to carry the cross. And in doing so, he ended up having his whole life changed. But still, this was not a cross he would have chosen on his own. Was he converted by the time he got to the top of Calvary? Or did his conversion happen later? I mean, we don't really know. We do know that because of tradition, he became a faithful disciple of Jesus. And he must have been known by the early church because he's remembered, he's named, even his family is named. And tradition has it too that because of his own choices, much later he was martyred and himself crucified. Later he picked up his own cross because he was following Jesus. But in this moment, he might not have chosen to carry the cross that day. But nevertheless, carrying it changed him. Here on this day, as we remember Jesus' crucifixion, I think it's a good day to acknowledge that suffering is a part of life. And even more than that, suffering, it's a part of the gospel. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that all suffering is somehow good or that it is part of gospel truth. Not all suffering is cross-bearing suffering. That would just be too easy of a piety. But I am suggesting that being a follower of Jesus doesn't give you a free pass on suffering. And in fact, we may even understand more so today than any other day of the year, of how following Jesus can bring suffering into your life. For today, I think we should just pause and reflect on Jesus' suffering and maybe also our own, and see how our own suffering compares in both scope and in purpose. I want to invite you to read all of chapter 15. That gives you all of Friday's events. And then will you reflect on these prompts? What difference does it make to know that Jesus willingly chose to suffer and die? Number 2, have you ever chosen to pick up your cross and follow Jesus? Did choosing it impact how you experienced the suffering? And how about this one? Over this last year, there's been a lot of suffering that we haven't chosen. And looking back, can you see any good that came out of the pain that you did not choose? I want to thank you for tuning in to this daily devotion. Make sure you like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and download our app. Pastor Adam from Lakeshore Church. Thanks for tuning in.